The Supreme Court of Appeal has affirmed the Equality Court's ruling that the display of the old South African flag incites harm and promotes hatred. The matter was brought before the court by Afrikaans rights lobby group Afriforum. The court also found that the old flag is a clear and painful symbol of apartheid and white supremacy. Afriforum has argued that the Equality Court's ban of the gratuitous display of the old flag was wide-reaching and an unconstitutional infringement on the rights of freedom of expression. The Supreme Court of Appeal disagrees and confirms that the public display of the flag for genuine artistic, academic or journalistic expression in the public interest is not prohibited. It's unclear if Afriforum will take the matter to the Constitutional Court. In fact, let's hear from Afriforum now. Joining us is Ernst van Zyl, who's a campaign officer for strategy and content at Afriforum. Ernst, thank you so much for making time for us. So this judgment was unanimous. The court says the display of the flag is harmful. It undermines the right to dignity. It provides fertile ground for brutality of racism. Is this where the battle stops for you, or are you going to challenge this further?
Well, I wish this was the case where I could just easily give you all the details of what we plan for the future. But as these things work, Afriforum first has to now convene with our legal team to know the way forward. So at the moment, if there was something to announce, I would break the news here on your channel right now. But there still needs to be a meeting between Afriforum and our legal team to discuss the way forward. And as soon as we have decided, we will let you know.
Yeah. And how are you feeling, though, about this decision that the Supreme Court of Appeal has taken? Because there was an Equality Court judgment. You were unhappy about it. You escalated the matter to the Supreme Court of Appeals, and now they've affirmed that judgment. So how are you feeling about it?
Well, I think it's more of a big picture feeling than a specific feeling related to this court case. The big picture that is very disappointing is the fact that we have all these constitutional rights that protect citizens from not just government tyranny, but also from all types of harm that can be incited against them. But then at the same time, then these rights, these constitutional rights, are just watered down. So two examples would be this court case, or this case at large, where you have the constitutional right to freedom of expression, except when the government wants to ban symbols. Or, for example, you have a constitutional right to private property unless the government wants to expropriate it without compensation. I'm talking about specifically the type of rhetoric and the type of debates and conversations going on surrounding these rights. It appears to me like we like to talk about these rights and pay lip service to them, but when they are really tested, and I mean rights are only tested in controversial cases, then unfortunately it seems we are willing to just water them down. That's unfortunately my impression from not just today, but in the bigger context of constitutional rights in South Africa.
Okay, let's talk about the rights, particularly the freedom of expression. There's a section in the Constitution which makes provision for the limitation of the right to freedom of expression to the extent that the limitation is reasonable and justifiable in an open and democratic society, and this is more important, based on human dignity, equality and freedom. So you're right, we need to respect the freedoms that are guaranteed in the Constitution, but there is a relationship that exists between freedom of expression and the right to dignity, which is a fundamental one.
But you see, that's where the limits of freedom of speech come in. Absolutely. Afriforum are not freedom of speech absolutists. We don't say people can just say and do what they want when it comes to freedom of expression. When it comes to freedom of expression, there's a clear limit, and that's the limit of hate speech, which in South Africa we do have limits on freedom of expression, unlike some other countries. But when it comes to that limit, that hate speech limit, and that hate speech is a concept that is often discussed in this court case as well. It's one of the key cruxes of the court case. When it comes to specifically the matter of hate speech has a specific definition, and that specific definition includes the incitement of harm and the incitement of violence, which from what we can see, and this is our major argument, was in this case and in the previous one, that a symbol that causes offense does not constitute inherently that it is also an incitement to harm or violence. So that's where the debate is currently, and hopefully we can continue that debate. Hopefully this is not just the end of the debate surrounding freedom of expression. Hopefully we can continue having robust conversations regarding our constitutional rights, where their limits are, where they, what they apply to. And like I said, this is the fight for your rights is something that's not going to just end. It's going to continue. It's always a continual process. It's always going to be a continual debate. Unfortunately, from what we see today in what's transpired in the court, this is a setback for the right to freedom of expression, but there's still a debate to be had, clearly.
I want to understand from Afriforum's position why you actually initially taken this matter to court, because maybe that's where we're not clear on. I think the court has made it clear, not only the Supreme Court of Appeal, but the Equality Court, that the public display of this flag for genuine artistic, academic, or journalistic expression in the public interest is not prohibited. So as Afriforum, through this court action, are you trying to get people to be allowed to publicly hold up and wave the flag when they want to?
When it comes to this case, Clement, it's really about the principle. If you might not believe me when I say this, but if this was about the banning of the EFF or ANC flag, we would be taking the exact same stance. I can promise you that. But when it maybe just you asked about the context, why we took up this case in the first place. Afriforum didn't take up this case. We were added as a respondent by the Nelson Mandela Foundation. I mean, if you as an organization take the stance that you are a supporter of your constitutional right to freedom of expression as a civil rights organization, and another organization adds you as a respondent in a court case about freedom of expression, I mean, to deny and then say, well, we're not going to take part in this court case would be a betrayal of your principles.
Yeah, but what I'm asking as Afriforum is, what are you trying to protect here? Would you be okay as Afriforum? Are you trying to protect a Clement or a John who may decide to wave the flag and they're not doing so for artistic, academic, or journalistic reasons? Or do you agree as Afriforum that this is an old apartheid flag that other people may find it harms their dignity, therefore we don't want people to wave it proudly so, even in public?
If there's no incitement to violence and no incitement to cause harm, then we are fighting for their right to freedom of expression. Like I said, this would apply to the banning of any symbol that is simply banned because it is offensive. I mean, Afriforum does not deny that the old South African flag is offensive to many, but that's exactly where the battle and the fight for freedom of expression will always be. The fight for freedom of expression will always be in the realm of the offensive. Where the limits are is where harm is incited and where violence is incited. But like I said, even the most controversial symbols that we as Afrikaners find offensive, we would fight for their right to be expressed if there is no added incitement to harm or violence, because this in the end is where you either have a right to freedom of expression or you don't when it comes to are you able to say or display things that are offensive. That's where the debate is ultimately had.
But that expression must also be within reason, shouldn't it? So as you fight for people to express themselves, when we are dealing with a symbol that is so offensive to black people in this country, given our context, as Afriforum, surely as you fight for that expression, it must also be within the limits of, whether it's artistic, maybe it's journalistic, it's for documentary purposes. Because the problem with that fight is you may open the door to people just waving the flag whenever they want to, even when they're not doing it for academic purposes, for instance.
That, again, the debate comes down to offensiveness versus the incitement to cause harm or violence. Afriforum does not support the banning of symbols or speech just because it is offensive. That's if you support freedom of expression, that should be your stance. Otherwise, you don't really support freedom of expression. Then you just support expression up until the point where someone finds offense. In the exact same way where someone, for example, that is offended by the level of corruption in this country might find the ANC flag offensive, we would never call for the banning of that flag. That's why this is such an important debate, because offense is such a wide range of things that people find offensive, different people find offensive. But we have to keep the limits on freedom of expression as limited as possible. Otherwise, we don't live in a country with freedom of expression. Then that is just lip service to a right that doesn't exist.
Yeah, except with an ANC flag, one will argue that didn't lead to a group of people in this country being treated as second-class citizens. Just lastly, before I let you go, we're out of time, Ernst. How do you then differentiate between this particular case and the one around the liberation songs to be banned? Didn't you take the EFF and Julius Malema to court for singing Kiss the Boer because you deemed that hate speech?
Exactly, because there we have a case of speech that incites violence, that incites harm. And in regards to your point where the ANC flag does not make some people feel like second-class citizens, I would counter-argument that their racial discriminatory laws and the family members of the Marikana massacre would say otherwise. That is why offense is such a controversial thing. Many people find different things offensive. We cannot just make conclusive statements saying this type of offense is too bad, but this type of offense is acceptable. That's the debate.
Yeah, Ernst, we're out of time. Thank you for making time for us. Ernst van Zyl is the campaign officer for strategy and content at Afriforum.